I'd like to call to order the Middletown City Council meeting for Tuesday, August 17th, 2021. Can we please start with a moment of meditation followed by the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, can you please call the roll for us this evening?
Ms. Vittori.
Here.
Ms. Nanny.
Here.
Mr. Moon.
Here.
Mr. Mulligan.
Here.
Mayor Condrey.
Here. Okay, let's start with our citizen comments. We have two citizen comments this evening. The first from Mr. Chris, do you say Beatty or Batty? Batty. The double T.
All right. Chris Batty, 128 Marymount Court, Middletown, Ohio. 3 months ago, I proposed a medical freedom ordinance here in the City Council where the City of Middletown would nullify all illegal mask and vaccination mandates. 2 months ago, the City Council's attorney responded by saying, quote, "Accordingly and fortunately, the end is near, and we can hopefully return to normal." Well, as we're seeing recently, we're not returning to normal. We're actually regressing. Just 2 weeks ago, City Council's response to me was, and I quote, "It's my belief that new mandates are doubtful at this time." That has proven to be incorrect with the data. So we're seeing a reignition of all these mandates, right? As of just yesterday, Middletown schools, Joe Biden, I think just an hour ago, said that air travel mandates for mask mandates will be extended all the way through the first of the year. So they're happening all over the place. The only response from council member on this was basically, we don't have the police capacity to enforce the mandates. This is not the point. This is about current council standing up and formally, officially upholding their oath to office and to the Ohio Constitution and the U.S. Constitution to protect our freedoms. So this is our chance. This is Middletown City Council's opportunity to stand and show that they support the citizens' rights. These mask and vaccination mandates are no different than the discrimination of 80 plus years ago that drove Americans to rightfully pass the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Title II. Was there opposition to it? Yes. Was it unpopular by many? Yes. Were there politicians and leaders that wouldn't stand behind it for fear of backlash? Absolutely. But were there enough bold folks that stood up for what was right to protect the people's God-given rights? If we really are in a pandemic, hospitals wouldn't be firing qualified, experienced staff simply because they declined a shot. FDA 21 Code Section 360B quotes, "Medical products that have been granted for emergency use cannot, I repeat, cannot be made compulsory, can only be administered after voluntary and after informed consent." This is not an FDA-approved vaccine yet, and this is a violation of federal law. I and others have approached this council for 3 months now to inform each member of what is the law and their duty, and illegal, unconstitutional efforts by state and federal authorities that continue to push and push for more mandates and discrimination at breakneck speed. It's clear as day what's coming, and to act like it isn't, or to just wait and hope and try to maybe react later, is what's allowing more and more of it to happen. So now is the time to stand, and that's what I requested this council, is to respond in some way to the citizens of Middletown, how they can protect the First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. The next citizen comment card I have is from Josh. It starts with an L.
Lawball.
Labaugh. Are you sure? No, I'm just kidding.
Thank you. Josh Lawball, 220 Aberdeen Drive. Also co-founder of Rolling Mill Brewing Company at 916 First Avenue here in Middletown. Ms. Mayor, Council, Mr. Palahniuk, thank you for letting me come up and speak. As a former City Council member, I want to acknowledge the important work done each day by all of you. Approving new staff members, negotiating city contracts, bringing new economic development opportunities to Middletown, approving purchases for street sweepers, fire trucks, police cruisers, finding new ways to pave streets, and improve infrastructure. all important work. Finding new ways to enhance and improve public safety, to get more police officers, to get more firefighters. Approving all city spending through the annual budgeting process. More or less, you're charged with keeping the city solvent and financially sound. This is very important. All of these duties as a councilman or councilwoman are important and very necessary functions. My purpose here today, however, is to remind you, each of you, your first and foremost duties as an elected official. And that is to say, to protect the basic constitutional rights of the citizens that you serve. Each of you have sworn an oath. I've taken the same oath when you took this position. Within this oath, you swore, you raised your right hand to defend the Constitution of the United States and the state of Ohio. Within the Constitution of the United States, as you all know from basic civics, is the Bill of Rights. It's a fundamental list of founding rules and principles that have allowed us to be the most free and prosperous people that the world has ever known. The Bill of Rights is a list of restrictions on the actions that may be taken by government in regards to the citizens of this nation. When other government officials abuse their powers, not only do you all have the right, but you have a legal duty to stand up against these actions. As Mr. Batty noted, these are God-given rights. That's how these documents came to be. They do not disappear, nor are they suspended in times of pandemic or emergencies. As such, you as members of Middletown City Council, are officials swearing an oath to uphold and defend all of these rights. In light of the reactionary, arbitrary, and just friggin' un-American actions by government officials across the United States in the past 15 months, I stand here calling for Tal Moon, Nicole Condrey, Amy Vittori, Joe Mulligan, and Monica Nenny to stand up and fight for what is right by speaking out against and possibly outlawing future business closures, mask mandates, restrictions on
I
gatherings,
hate to cut you off, but that's the
and
thing.
disclosure of personal health information. I am almost done.
I can't, if I make an exception, I have to do it for everyone, and I'm mandated by council's rules to.
Can I have 30 more seconds, Council? I'm almost done, I swear.
If you would like to email the rest of your comments, council will be happy to review them.
Okay, I'll come back next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sorry. Okay, that brings us next to council comments. We'll start on the right with Ms. Ninny. Well, on your left, my right.
I have just a few comments to thank staff for all of their hard work on the presentation of the ARPA spending. We had a really productive work session this past week, albeit a long session. It was very informative, and for anyone who's interested in sort of the detail on how we are spending our ARPA dollars, I would suggest you go out and watch that meeting. It was very informative. And that's all I have tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moon?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to thank the school district and their leadership for the work session last week. I thought there was some good productive dialogue and certainly a long way to go and a lot of work to be done and considerations to be had, but it was a productive meeting. To Mr. Batty's question, I had sent him an email. I think the point I was trying to make was I haven't seen, unless I've missed it, anything come down from the governor as far as lockdowns or mandates from the governor. We've seen some school district make some mandates, which is outside our purview, I believe. But what I'm seeing from the local level is recommendations. And the contacts I have in Columbus and at the local health department is what I sent based, those conversations is what informed my email to you. So unless I've missed something, and if I have, you have my email, please send it back if you've seen something from the governor.
Mr. Mulligan?
Thank you, Your Honor. No comments tonight.
Ms. Vittori?
I wanted to thank Downtown Middletown, Inc. and the hard work, especially from Mika Glazer and Jeff Payne for the beer fest this weekend. I can tell you it was probably Gracie's busiest night since we've opened, which was just so lovely to see. And it was a confluence of events, but one of the big thrusts of that was definitely the Beer Fest. And it's a lot of work, and they're understaffed and underappreciated, so I just wanted to put forth the positive about that work and just congratulate them on a very successful first-year event also. And I think they sold out, so that's pretty impressive. Going forward, this weekend, we launch our own geocaching trail. Maybe if you have kids, you've done one. If not, it's still pretty fun. It will be a 3-day event, and it basically launches what will now be a trail of geocaches. So there's prizes, and geocaching is basically using an app with coordinates to find treasures. So that's why kids love it. But adults as well, it's a worldwide phenomenon. You join groups, it's a lot, and I think it's gonna bring a lot of people to Middletown. We had done some stops, I think, last year during COVID, and it was very popular. So now this trail, the Visitors Bureau and Mary Hutlinger, who does amazing work as well, has really put her time and effort into this. So that'll be an exciting thing that starts this Friday it launches. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to address the citizen comments this evening. I wasn't sure whether to do it in new business, or I guess Mr. Moon touched on it. I want to express my personal request to city staff, and I'd love to hear my fellow council members. But that, I believe it was Ohio Senate Bill 22, I think it was, the one that limited the state's powers on mandating the masks, which is why I believe now the only entities that could do that are down to the city level, which is what I believe Mr. Batty, excuse me, and Mr. Laubau were probably referencing. My personal desire is for Middletown not to engage or propose in any mask or vaccine mandates. And I want to express that to city staff so that if they were ever considering proposing that I am personally not in favor of it. And I would love to hear from my council members. I mean, we've got a lot of citizens who've asked us these questions, and, where do we stand as leaders in our community on that? And what are your thoughts on it? If anyone would like to speak up, I'd love to hear it.
I agree.
I haven't seen any recommendation from staff, and I haven't heard any from my colleagues that there's any interest in that, so.
I don't see a necessity at this point in time, but I also can't predict the future, and so I would never want to say never to anything until the situation arises. But currently where we are, I don't think any citywide mandates are necessary.
I can agree with my fellow council that, as long as they are recommendations and not mandates, that we seem to all be on the same page.
Great. Good. Well, I appreciate the comments, and if we see a need for any further discussion on it, we can do that in a little bit more in-depth conversation, but I'm happy to hear we're on the same page about that, and wanted to make sure our city staff knew where we stood on it as well, so that it is a hot topic and a difficult one to deal with for sure. So thank you for having that discussion. I don't have any other comments this evening for council comments. The city manager report, Mr. Palaniuk.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of City Council. I wanted to note that the bike path connection between Middletown and Franklin is now complete, that new section. The ribbon cutting ceremony will be held Thursday, September 2nd, 2:30 p.m. at 4401 North Verity Parkway. You will all receive an official invite yet, but please put that on your calendar so you can plan for it. And then also, since we are now in mid-August, I would like to kind of provide a bit of an update on our paving progress. So I'm going to ask Director of Public Works and Utilities, Mr. Scott Tadish, to come up and just kind of tell you a little bit about where we are, what we've accomplished, and kind of what to look for in the future.
Thanks, Jim. Good evening.
Good evening.
So we got a lot going on, as you hopefully can see. Just going to give a brief update. We are going to do a more robust update to the community online through Shelby, but just wanted to give council a quick update on where we stand. I'll start first with the paving levee project. So Zone 1, where they started the work back in May, they will be looking to apply the surface course of asphalt starting later this week. That'll go through about a week and a half, and that'll wrap up that first section of the paving project. On Zone 2, which they started in maybe a month ago or so, they'll continue with concrete curb repairs and handicap ramp upgrades over the next month, followed by that surface course, we'll say mid-September. And then Zone 3, is expected to start in early September. And this will include the Mayfield and Greenfields area of town. I mean, and again, we'll provide maps on this as we put more information out. In addition to that paving levee work, and that represents the total there, just to give you a rough idea, around 43 lane miles of work so far there. And then we're also have started the 21 local paving project, which is our annual paving project. That's on multiple streets sprinkled throughout the city. Currently, they've started milling and doing base stabilization on that project, which will be followed by intermediate asphalt placement and concrete repairs. Then ultimately, your surface course will be later this fall. That's around 14 lane miles. The ODOT urban paving project on State Route 73 between Germantown Road and the northeast city limits next to the bike path, that is mostly complete now. I think they may just have some striping work left, but that is mostly complete, and that was approximately 19 lane miles. We've also started water main work on Poinciana and Hampton Place. Both of those streets will be fully repaved once that water main work is completed later this fall. Also wrapping up our Lakeside Sewer Redirect project, and we'll be paving a few streets with that here in the coming weeks. And that's about it for paving, which is a lot. Yeah. Also wanted to mention, just to note, we'll be putting something out on this, the University Bridge Deck project. We'll be pouring the second phase, the other half of the deck coming up next week. We're actually going to close South University again from August 24th to August 30th. And we'll detour traffic with that. But we'll put out a formal notice on that as well. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Just a comment, Scott. It's a huge lift, so thank you. You're doing it without a city engineer. So, you know, your work and your team's work isn't going unnoticed, so please express our appreciation to all those, everybody in your office.
We'll do that.
Everybody
Thank you.
involved.
I find myself actually turning down random streets that have recently been paved just because they look nice. and I look at the neighborhood and I think, I had no idea this neighborhood looked this nice. And it really transforms our neighborhoods and our housing, and it's great to see. I love it.
I too would like to express my thanks to you and your department. I would also like to remind our citizens that while the roads are repaved, the speed limits are the same. So please be mindful of the existing speed limits on these beautifully paved roads.
Scott, could you note a little bit about kind of how you expect them to continue working throughout the remainder of the year? Thank you.
So we'll continue, really the hope is to continue paving up until Christmas, weather permitting. As we get into December, things can get a little tricky. And then even after that, we're hoping to continue in some cases doing concrete work into the winter as much as we can to sort of stay ahead of the project as weather permits, as I always say. I mean, that's always my disclaimer, but so we're full steam ahead and moving
Thank you.
forward, so.
Thank you. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Okay. That brings us to consent agenda. Ms. King, let's present that for us.
For your consideration this evening, we have the approval of the City Council minutes from June the 1st and August the 3rd, 2021. To receive and file the following Board and Commission minutes. Cemetery Board, April 21st, 2021. Citizens Advisory Board, May 21st, 2021. And the Board of Health from July 13th, 2021. To confirm the personnel appointment of Kinsey Bronnenberg to the position of part-time Community Security Officer in the Department of Public Safety, Division of Police. To receive and file an oath of office for Jonathan Zachary Hoover. To request approval to purchase the following items totaling $75,622.26 off the ODAS contract for 2 new fire trucks and associated equipment. 2 2021 GMC Sierra 2500 pickups from Bob Ross Auto Group of Centerville, Ohio, in the amount of $66,296. Graphics package for decals on trucks from Danco Lettering of Dayton, Ohio, in the amount of $2,286.26. And 2 ARE Deluxe Commercial Unit DCU topper boxes from Pro Trim of West Carrollton, Ohio, in the amount of $7,040.
I move to approve the issues and actions set forth in the consent agenda.
Second?
Ms. Gank, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Nenny?
Yes.
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Condrey?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Ms. Cohen, can you please present the legislation for us this evening?
Yes, Your Honor. Prior to getting started this evening, we do have one matter we're asking you to consider as an emergency. So I would ask if there was a motion to waive the charter requirements for 2 readings and 30 days to enactment regards to ordinance O 2021-67.
I move that the charter provision requiring readings on 2 separate days be waived and the ordinance number O 2021-67 be declared an emergency and read one time only.
Second. Ms. Gank, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Condrey?
Yes.
Ms. Nenny?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Thank you. The first matter for your consideration this evening is Resolution R 2021-31, a resolution authorizing the city manager to submit an application to the Ohio Public Works Commission for project year 36, requesting funding for the resurfacing and reconstruction of various streets throughout the city and restoration of curbs, gutters, driveway aprons, and sidewalks deemed defective by the city, and to enter into agreements for such funding.
So move for adoption.
Second.
Any comments from council or city manager? Okay, Ms. Gank, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Condrey?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Ms. Nenny?
Yes.
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Next matter for your consideration is ordinance O 2021-64, an ordinance authorizing the city to enter into an enterprise zone agreement with Phoenix Metals, providing for a new manufacturing facility as a development project and tax exemption pursuant to Ohio Enterprise Zone Program.
So move for adoption.
Second?
Any comments or questions from council or city manager? Okay, Ms. Gank, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Condrey?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Ms. Nenny?
Yes.
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Item number 3 this evening is resolution number R 2021-32, a resolution to make adjustments to appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the city of Middletown, counties of Butler and Warren, state of Ohio, for the period ending December 31st, 2021. Here for a second reading.
So move for adoption.
Second?
Any comments or questions from council or city manager? Okay, Ms. Gank, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Ms. Nenny?
Yes.
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Condrey?
Yes.
The next matter for your consideration is ordinance O 2021-65, and ordinance amending the pay and benefits ordinances, ordinance number O 2020-69, and ordinance O 2020-70. Here for a second reading.
So move for adoption.
Second.
Any comments from council or city manager?
Just a comment, I just wanted to say that I'm pleased to see that we're creating this position and that it's going to be focused on code enforcement. It's such a big need, and that's probably the number one issue I hear back about via email is people contacting council with code enforcement issues. So pleased to see this coming before us.
I agree. Okay, any other comments? And Ms. Gank, please, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Nenny?
Yes.
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Condrey?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
The next matter is ordinance O 2021-67, an ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a grant agreement with Community Building Institute of Middletown and declaring an emergency.
So move for adoption.
Second?
Mr. Palanick, would you like to comment on this?
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of City Council, you all had participated with the school board very recently in a joint meeting where we talked about the possibility of developing a new and expanded community center at the Sunny Hill Community Center. And we talked about that at that time, that any kind of endeavor like this would require a joint committee that would be named probably by the school board as well as the city. And that committee, made up of community stakeholders, would really need some help and support in terms of professional assistance that would assist in both designing and costing out what a project like this would look like and how it would function and what programs would turn into what aspects of the building. So as a result of that, we have community development block grant funding that came to us through the CARES Act as a supplemental addition to our normal community development block grant funding. And this act would propose using $50,000 of that to grant to the CBI in order for them to then have a contract with an independent professional consultant to assist the committee in doing that work. We chose CBI because as a nonprofit that in the past has consistently been able to report and monitor the use of CDBG funds, they're familiar with it, they know how to do it. So it would be expedient, and we know that they've proven they can do it. So that was the reason we really has to go to a nonprofit like this. So we would ask your consideration in making that grant of $50,000.
Just out of curiosity, was that $50,000 otherwise allocated, or do we just kind of have some CDBG funds hanging out there?
The good news in this case, it was not specifically allocated. I believe that it was still available because it had been the CARES Act supplemental dollars.
Okay. And are there more of those available? Just the CDBG?
Susan, is there at this point any?
There is a small amount, I will tell you. I don't have the exact number, and I'm happy to get that for you to do, but there is a small amount of funds that have been unallocated up to this point in time.
And are those funds that have to be spent by a certain time as well, because they came through the original Fed fund? Oh, those don't, because they're CDBG, even though they were extra.
So your normal annual CDBG has some time restrictions to it. The CARES Act funding had a slightly longer time frame to it. So I won't say they never have to be spent, but I will tell you that it's a longer period of time.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments from council? Ms. Gang, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Condrey?
Yes.
Ms. Nanny?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Last but not least is Resolution R 2021-33, a resolution to make adjustments to appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Middletown, Counties of Butler and Warren, State of Ohio, for the period ending December 31st, 2021, and declaring an emergency. However, no action is requested until September 7th.
Just out of clarification, is that a second reading emergency being asked?
So
Why?
on the 7th, it will come back as an emergency, yes.
Okay, so this is
The
not,
first reading of a two-reading.
so it's a second reading emergency, so it will be enacted immediately upon?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to clarify since we had a couple questions in the past about that. Mr. Palaniuk, would you like to comment on this?
Yes, in this case, we are asking for an amendment to the fiscal year 2021 budget in order to have a supplemental appropriation of $20,000. Development Services Department would be using this to seek professional consulting assistance that would allow us to complete the National Registered District effort within the Oakland neighborhood. I know this is a project that had been in place for a long time, and folks were looking to see it accomplished. We wanted to make sure that happened. We had some discussions about this in a recent meeting, and this is basically the act that would allow us then to take the money and to seek that consultant and to complete it. And I know that Ashley Combs has been working on it. If there are any specific questions, I'm sure that she would be able to answer them.
Is this essentially replacing the former consultant?
This would be completing work that hadn't yet been completed, that the last consultant began, but did not fully complete. And it would be, in a sense, re-looking at it as well to make certain that it's consistent with what the community and what everybody wants to see in terms of the final configuration of the district and how it is best served and its greatest chance to succeed, basically.
So would they be engaging with the neighborhood association? Yet to be determined?
I think Ashley probably can respond to that.
So we did put an RFP out. You might have saw that for the Oakland. We received back 3. We are actually interviewed 2 of them today. Our previous consultant did not apply for that. We will be choosing them probably mid-next week. So that would be a new consultant finishing what was started or taking a new look. And yes, part of that would be reaching out to the Oakland Neighborhood Association, having meetings with them, city council, staff, working very closely in the state historic preservation office. Any other questions for me?
So is this both about the map and the size and all of that?
Yes.
As well as the financing alternatives and the different kinds of TIFs? And I know before that was part of the,
The TIFs wouldn't necessarily be involved of, they will be looking at it from the scope of the National
just
Historic.
this is more about the map. This isn't about the financing piece.
That's correct. yeah.
Correct.
Because last time that consultant was kind of doing both.
Correct, this will just be for the historic nomination of the district and what boundaries those may be. They'll be taking a new look, a comprehensive look, and working with Historic Society, the neighborhood staff to figure those boundaries.
Okay, thank you.
So if, Ashley, if that consultant is selected before the next city council meeting, will we have a chance to hear from them before we vote on this resolution?
I mean, we could do that if you'd like, if that's something council would like.
All this is doing is appropriating the funds so that they have it available for the contract.
Or that, okay.
So it's not awarding an actual contract.
Would we separately have to award that contract then, or is that something that would be?
That'll depend on how the pricing comes back on the contract.
Okay.
Yes, and we would have them come in and do a presentation for you. Part of our interview is them coming in, making sure we're very transparent about the process and where we are in it.
Wonderful.
Great. Any other questions for me? Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe that concludes legislation.
Do we have any new business items this evening? I have a couple, but I'll let my council.
Yeah, Your Honor, I think you're aware of, council's aware of the email that we received from Betsy Hannafin regarding excessive speed on South Main Street, and I asked Mr. Palahniuk if you had any thoughts on that, to address it, or
We had some internal discussion between both Scott Tadish and Chief Burke and myself, so I guess I would ask Scott and/or Chief Burke to talk about, some of the thoughts that we've had. I know that there's some speed issues, and there may also be some sort of traffic safety issues, so look at it from either perspective. Chief Burke?
Thank you, Jim. I did pull the accidents for Scott that he requested. One accident was a DUI, hit a parked car. We arrested the individual for that. We have done a traffic study back in February to the end of March, and the average speed was 25 miles an hour. For the average speed, there was some speed a little bit higher at times, but the average speed for the time we had it out there was 25 miles an hour. I've contacted OSP. They're going to be assisting us with the motorcycle officers. Again, we're going to be using them. I've posted some additional overtime for traffic, but you have to understand I have 6 officers working at a time, and I get complaints not over on Main Street, but also every other street in Middletown for speed. I just don't have enough resources right now. That's why we've been utilizing OSP. My plan in October is to actually start a traffic unit with Officer Shia Kyrese. She'll be a full-time traffic officer that will be able to float around the city and work on accidents and also speed situations like we have on Main Street. So bear with us. We are working on it. Speed is my #1 complaint throughout the city. We do have speed trailers and signs that we'll be getting up in different areas. But not only Main Street, but I get complaints every day on University, Wilbraham Road, throughout the entire city. So we are increasing the enforcement, and with the assistance of OSP, we're hoping to continue that for some time.
Chief, October as in 45 days from now, or is
Yeah, October, 45 days. I have to get the new officers trained. Training takes 4 to 6 months. Once I get the new recruits out, then I'll be able to transfer her to the traffic unit full-time in October.
Great.
I have a question that's probably more for Scott, but about the potential use of speed bumps around the city and if that's ever economically feasible or if it actually works or.
I mean, historically, we've not had speed bumps on city streets for several reasons. One is for EMS, so as we're responding to emergencies, you don't want to have to hit a speed bump. 2 is for maintenance reasons. One of the major ones being snow removal. But typically, we have not had speed bumps on city streets. I don't know. I know, we certainly could look at those, but, maybe not speed bumps, but like the speed humps in some areas, but it does take analysis to determine if they're warranted and to justify the installation of them.
Scott, do you have any other suggestions, sort of from a public works standpoint, that can help with the control of speed?
There's no silver bullet from like a traffic calming perspective to deal with it. I mean, quite honestly, enforcement, I mean, I hate to say it, that's as far as immediate problems, that's the best way to handle it. We certainly can look at certain traffic calming measures, but a lot of those are more long-term and
Now, what are those? Are those like
say you
stop
build a
sign,
roundabout
stop light,
in some places, or you could build in some, I've seen in some other cities like some chicanes where it makes the road weave to hopefully slow people down when they get to that point. I mean, but all those take some research and analysis.
I guess I would take exception. I mean, I don't think you can just toss back to enforcement to get the speeds down. I mean, for instance, recently Nell Bar, which was, a two-way street with parking on one side, the side parking was eliminated for a turn lane, which arguably increases the speeds on Nell Bar. I mean, it's coming up on a year since that was done. So I think things that we do engineering-wise, certainly, and we don't have, well, I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to rule it out completely. I'm just saying as far as short term, I believe enforcement is the best thing we have.
But eliminating 4 lanes or 5 lanes of traffic on Verity Parkway southbound, I think certainly helped slow speeds, made it safe for pedestrians when we did that downtown.
Yeah, I mean, the crossings were shortened up, so that absolutely made it safer for pedestrians.
I want to make sure we're looking at, let's assume our downtown grows like we want it to grow, and that any ingress and egress from that downtown area, we've really taken into consideration the traffic and because, yes, while enforcement may be our short-term solution, we need to look at mid and long-term and what we can do.
Right, and just for reference, I did talk to a traffic engineering consultant about Main Street specifically to look at possible future options. Obviously, there's a cost to that, and we're analyzing that and determining what the best path forward is.
And I did see in Ms. Hannivan's email that the South Main Historic Neighborhood met with the city and actually offered to spend money out of their own neighborhood funds to help with the situation. Was that ever, or did that go anywhere?
So I've been meeting with them on at least a couple of times and talking with their president via email several times, and we have discussed that. We just haven't come to a conclusion yet. I mean, part of it is just very busy, not to make excuses, but we just haven't come to an ultimate conclusion. I know they were looking at a combination of things they were interested in.
My concern is it does seem like it's a potentially lethal issue that, I mean, the examples she gave were tremendously terrible. And I would hate for us to delay much further, if they're offering to provide funds, and I'm not saying they should have to, but obviously they would want something done, and if we can help them at all and keep from something tragic happening, I'm all for it. I mean, I don't know the solution. Obviously, no one has the exact solution, but if we can try something or have a plan, I think the neighborhood especially would appreciate something done.
I would certainly be interested in seeing what that consultant and what that could produce as far as a longer term solution for traffic control on that street. I mean, certainly the homes there are historic, and when one gets hit, it's certainly a tragedy. That irreplaceable woodwork and materials that just cannot be reproduced and that sort of thing. I think that's a lot of the concern from a lot of the homeowners in that neighborhood. I mean, Pam Murphy, I think she got a vehicle almost all the way through her house one time. So I think that there are those concerns, and those aren't even new concerns. So I would be in support of seeing what that study would look like.
I've seen a lot of roundabouts added to other cities recently that look very nice. I'm sure they're not cheap, but I think from an aesthetics perspective and a traffic perspective, I would be fully supportive of looking into those around the city if that was an option.
And maybe not just in that neighborhood, but if there were other neighborhoods that could benefit from those as well.
Okay.
I know you guys are working hard. Add one more thing.
Chop, chop.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
So another new business item, I'm not sure we fully finished the conversation or really had one at all, but the idea of a committee for the community center. I think it's kind of the ball's in our court as council to look at what do we think that looks like and propose that to the school board. Does that sound about like the next steps? I know Mr. Palahniuk threw out an idea out there, which I actually thought was quite well thought out, even if it may have been a quick thought in his mind. I think it came from a place of good experience with these things. His proposal was 14 total, I believe, members on the committee, 2 school board, 2 city council, 5 community stakeholders that the school board proposes, 5 from city council, and then 2 city administrators, school administrators, non-voting members, and 2 from the city staff. Is that accurate, Mr. Palahniuk? At least what you had
Yes.
thought might be a good option for us?
That was it, yep. Mhm.
And was it to be appointed kind of like we do charter review, where each council member chooses one, as opposed to when we come together for like annual boards and commissions, which are permanent?
Yes, I think that was the thought. Mhm.
I mean, I think that sounds like a great number. I wouldn't want to do it much larger than that, only for fear that schedules wouldn't line up and nothing would actually be accomplished. But I think that's a good number, and we can all feel like the city is represented in a lot of various fashions. So I would be supportive of that personally. Do you have any
Just
other
the
comments?
question I would have is just how do we make sure that a lot of those stakeholders who have already put in so much time and effort are included? I mean, yeah, I would hope that we would pick them, but I would hate to see some of those people that are so integral to it not be included somehow.
I would hope that my message about it to people who've asked so far has been whether an individual is on this specific committee or not. I would hope that the meetings are open forum where there's time for people to participate and add their ideas, because I think it's important that everybody participates in those. And just because someone's not officially a voting member of it, I think they can be very, very included without, yes, we should, involve those who are the most integral, but I hope it doesn't preclude others.
Right, that would be my concern. Like, how can Karen Maney not be part of it? You know what I'm saying? Like, in a way, because she is so much part of it. So I agree on, like, us appointing people, but I guess at some point, maybe we just need to make sure that somebody's including some of these very essential people.
And maybe some of those roles are designated for a representative.
Like a
from
CBI person or.
this organization, which we would.
Right, because they're the key stakeholders who are going to be executing so much of the work, so.
I almost wonder, and this is off the top of my head on this one, but someone like Karen Maney, is it necessary for her to be a voting member of it? Or is it better for her to be a non-voting member? She participates in every meeting, and the community stakeholders are the ones providing the input. She obviously very, very involved and crucial to the mission, but maybe it's not necessary for her to have the voting.
Right, or is her voting more important than city council or school voting? Should we just be more like liaisons, as we are with other boards?
I like the idea of the city council and the school board having the votes, because we're able to then represent the people at large a little bit more than, the individuals who represent their own diaspora or their interests, and we can then serve as a greater representation of a broader body, so people feel they can come to the city council member or school board member and be represented, whereas they may not feel represented by a specific individual that's on that already, so it kind of is a catch-all.
I agree, because it's different from standard boards and commissions, because they become public officials when they join that board, whereas this probably wouldn't legally be a public meeting, because there's not going to be a quorum of elected officials, or maybe it will be, I don't know, maybe that's a question for staff. If the school board and the city council appointing a board makes it a public board, maybe it does. That's probably a good question. But I was going to say, city and schools are going to probably be the long-term fiduciary of this center, so it probably makes sense for us to have a voting interest in where it's headed.
I guess it's just like MVB and DMI in a way, though. We fund those as well, but we're liaisons. And speaking from experience on MVB, I went in and was the president of that temporary board. that recreated that organization that then transitioned to the actual board. So do we also want to consider that there should be DNA between this committee and then the ultimate committee board that starts to run it? It would make sense to me. You wanted, that's what we did with MVB. I think we had 12 and then we went to 8, but we kept a lot of the 12 because, again, just that connectivity and DNA of having done the work and having relationships into then execution. I think it might make sense to look longer term on how we want this to play out.
I guess I would want, I mean, from a legal standpoint, is there any direction that legal would have for us on what would be the best way for the city to remain a stakeholder to the board and in whatever fashion makes the most sense?
I think we need to be very cognizant of the fact that this building is, and until we say otherwise, remains a city asset. So the city will inherently have to be very involved because we are the legal owner of the facility. There will be a collection of associated legal agreements with every entity that gives money to the project. I think what that looks like, and to Ms. Vittoria's point about maybe looking more long-term, is a decision for this body to decide whether we want this to be a temporary, we're working on the construction and development of a new center, so that may last 2-3 years, versus do you want this to be a board that helps to guide the facility for a longer period of time, and that helps to determine the form of it. That if you want it to be more long-term, it probably does act as a city board or commission that we go through a formal process on. If it's something where we just want to solicit some advice and participation in this period of construction and new development and in helping to facilitate, it maybe takes a different aspect to it. To Mr. Moon's point, though, either way, I would tell, and I would pretty much require whoever is leading that board to hold it as a public meeting. This is important to the entire community. It needs to involve the entire community, and there's no reason for us to endorse doing business that way otherwise, that it would need to be open to the public and available.
I would be in favor of maybe, I understand the point of looking long-term, absolutely. I also understand that this is a project that we need to get up and running and moving, and I fear if we look too long-term that we may drag our feet on actually selecting the committee, and there may be more deliberation that is not only requested but required in such a case, and I think it's really important to get the project up and running and moving, and so I would like to look at it maybe as the construction and deliberation of what's going to happen kind of a committee.
And there's nothing to say if you were to choose to set it up that way that it couldn't develop into something else later. So I certainly think that's a possibility, but I think those take a little bit different look depending on how you want to run.
Yeah, I don't want to hold it up whatsoever, so I wasn't
Yeah,
saying long-term in
absolutely.
terms of stretching it out. I was just thinking forward, going through
Absolutely.
that we could pre-plan at least some DNA connectivity. Maybe it's, it goes from 10 to 6 and we say we want 4 people to stay or something like that, so that we're just planning it for the future a bit better.
So the next steps on this, do we need to, as a council, propose to the school board what we feel would be a good committee size and shape? And they mull it over, and then I don't even know if we have to vote. I don't know if this is, I don't know how formal this is. Jim or Susan or anyone have a thought on that, or is that just punted to us entirely?
This is an entirely collaborative process. I think there's no reason you can't just sort of be conversational about it and come to some sort of consensus if that's easily done. I mean, if it becomes difficult, that's when it tends to be more formalized and you do a lot of votes and try to figure it out. But I think if there's something that sounds like what you want to do, I would certainly propose that to the school board. I would guess they'd probably like something similar to that, and they can move along fairly quickly. I mean, it's an ad hoc committee. You're not creating a formally structured committee of the city. You're creating a new entity, something that's brand new, because you're joining together with other groups to sort of create something that out of whole cloth for the first time.
Well, I would go ahead and propose that we suggest this format to the school board and see what their response is and move from there if there's agreement.
I agree.
I think so.
Well, I'm happy to personally take it to them and ask Mr. Rizzo if he feels comfortable with that, just from a board-to-board perspective. Okay, sounds good. Thank you, guys. Any other new business topics?
Just one, it is board and commission season, so it'll be time
I
to.
feel like it's
sorta-
always board and commission season.
I don't disagree, but I'll be getting that list out of open positions, and that application is always available on our website. So just be keeping that in mind as well, that there'll be some new positions opening up at the end of 2021.
But to be clear, those applications are always available whenever someone gets the gumption to
Yes.
volunteer their time.
Yes, and then just, it's submitted right on the website and comes directly to me.
Have we fixed the ability for us to read the entirety of the application? Do you remember last time it was truncated?
I think it has been corrected,
Okay.
because we got some weird versions of different things. You know, some of them came through just perfectly, and then some of them came through in formats that were barely discernible. So we'll double check.
Thank you. Okay. If there's nothing else, then we have a request to move to executive session under the authority of ORC 121.22G1 to consider the employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official. Do we have a motion to move to executive session?
So move for adoption.
Second?
Ms. Skank, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Condrey?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Ms. Nenny?
Yes.
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Okay, I was just looking at the calendar to figure out when we're even meeting next. It's a whole 3 weeks from now, I believe, September 7th, 17:30 or 5:30 PM here in council chambers. So after the executive session, we will dismiss until September 7th.
Thank you.
Until then, blue skies over Middletown.